At least one of the 3 state Senate recall petitions is qualified, and signatures are due on the other 2 starting on Thursday.
And that's adding significance to a federal lawsuit that seeks to halt the recall elections and invalidate the state's recall laws as potentially unconstitutional.
Politics Now co-host Steve Sebelius sat down with one of the attorneys who filed that lawsuit, who argues that the recalls are unjustified. Steve?
Well, Attorney Bradley Schrager acknowledges that there's nothing in Nevada law that governs why a recall may be filed. But he's also arguing that these recalls are not directed at misconduct or wrongdoing by elected officials. Instead, he says they're an abuse of the process and a naked grab for power.
What we're looking at is after the 2016 election, the Republicans looking at the playing field, realizing that they had very little opportunity and few paths back to the majority in the state Senate. They decided upon a scheme that would essentially privatize elections. They decided that they have enough money and enough resources that they could rerun an election they had just lost, and rerun an election at a time and a place and with an electorate that they thought they could mold in a way that would give them a better chance to win.
Now, Schrager said that not only is that a brand new abuse of the recall process in Nevada, it may also be unconstitutional. He argues in the lawsuit that the recall disproportionately affects minorities and non-English speakers because it calls for an election at a time when members of those groups especially are not expecting or prepared to go to the polls.
The burden upon these individuals, if we were to have elections popping up really at the whim of individual financiers who decide they want to go through a signature process and get this put on a ballot, I mean, that is undeniably going to place burdens upon those who sometimes have difficulty making themselves heard at the ballot box anyway.
Schrager and his co-counsels argue the recalls thus violate several constitutional provisions, as well as the Voting Rights Act. They filed a motion in federal court for an injunction to halt the recall elections that they're hoping goes before a judge by the end of this month. Now, Schrager did say that if the recalls are successful, they could become more common and possibly used by both parties to target their opponents in close districts. He said if the laws are invalidated, however, it could give lawmakers an opportunity to review the recall statutes and come up with a compromise that imposes some standards for recalls while also preserving that right for Nevada voters, which, of course, they want to keep.
Interesting precedent either way.
Yeah, absolutely. This will be a really fascinating case when it actually goes before a judge.
Yep.
Thanks, Steve.
Thanks, Steve.